Déjà vu. Déjà vu, one of life's strangest and most familiar glitches. It's that eerie feeling that the present moment has already happened before, as if you've stood here, heard these words, or seen this exact scene once in the past. Studies suggest that nearly two-thirds of people experience déjà vu at least once in their lives. Throughout history, it has carried many interpretations. Ancient cultures often linked it to reincarnation, believing it to be a memory from a previous life. In the 19th century, some writers thought it was a dream bleeding into reality, a brief overlap between sleeping and waking worlds. Modern neuroscience, however, provides a more grounded explanation. Researchers have discovered that déjà vu occurs when the brain's recognition system briefly misfires. Normally, the hippocampus helps us tell new experiences apart from old memories. But sometimes, due to stress, fatigue, or timing errors in neural circuits, the brain mistakenly labels the present as something familiar. Brain imaging studies have even detected these false familiarity signals in areas responsible for recognition and recollection. What feels like reliving a past moment is actually just two memory pathways falling slightly out of sync. Clinical observations add another layer. People with temporal lobe epilepsy often report déjà vu right before a seizure, suggesting that bursts of irregular electrical activity can trigger the sensation. Yet most episodes occur in completely healthy individuals, proving how easily perception and memory can blur. Mysterious in culture, but ordinary in science, déjà vu reveals the delicate boundary between memory and experience. It's not a glitch in time or evidence of past lives. It's a brief moment when the brain stumbles, tricking us into believing we've lived the present before. Sleep paralysis. Centuries ago, physicians documented patients who woke in the night convinced a dark figure was sitting on their chest. They couldn't move, struggled to breathe, and believed they were under attack. Despite the passage of time, the same haunting reports appear across cultures, from Japan's Kaneshibari to Newfoundland's Old Hag. Today, we recognize this terrifying state as sleep paralysis. The glitch happens in the fragile border between sleep and wakefulness. During REM sleep, the brain temporarily paralyzes most muscles to prevent us from physically acting out our dreams. But if the mind wakes before the body does, awareness returns while the body remains frozen. The result is a horrifying sense of being awake but unable to move, trapped inside one's own body. The vivid hallucinations that often accompany sleep paralysis also have a neurological basis. Parts of the brain that create dream imagery may still be active, projecting visions and sounds into waking consciousness. A shadow in the corner, the sound of footsteps, or a figure looming at the bedside all feel real because they come from the same neural circuits that generate dreams. A 2011 study found that over 30% of people experience sleep paralysis at least once in their lifetime, proving how common this strange overlap is. What once inspired myths of demons, spirits, and supernatural attacks is now understood as a timing error between the systems that control sleep and movement. The fear it triggers is real, and the visions feel real, but the cause isn't. Sleep paralysis isn't a sign of possession or danger. It's a harmless yet deeply unsettling reminder of how delicate the line between dreaming and waking truly is, a brief moment when the body lags behind the mind. Pareidolia. A piece of burnt toast once sold for thousands of dollars, not because of its flavor, but because people believed they could see the face of the Virgin Mary scorched onto it. What seemed like a divine sign to some is actually a classic example of pareidolia. This phenomenon is remarkably common. You might spot a cloud shaped like a rabbit, a power socket that looks like it's smiling, or the famous man in the moon. For centuries, across cultures, people have seen faces, figures, and symbols hidden in random patterns. In medieval Europe, unusual rock shapes were thought to carry spiritual meaning. Today, social media fuels the same fascination. Every oddly shaped shadow or reflection is framed as uncanny proof that the universe is sending a message. Neuroscience, however, provides a simple explanation. Human survival once depended on rapidly recognizing faces, identifying friend or foe in a split second. The brain's fusiform face area, which specializes in face detection, is so sensitive that it sometimes overreacts, detecting faces where none actually exist. In a 2009 fMRI study, participants viewing random noise patterns activated the same brain regions used for processing real faces. Our brains prefer false positives, seeing a face that isn't there, over missing a real one that might matter. Still, the experience often feels magical. A random blot of coffee becomes a profile, a sign, maybe even a message. What starts as a visual glitch transforms into meaning because we naturally project stories onto what we see. The truth is, Pareidolia isn't proof of hidden messages in the world. It's proof of how deeply our minds crave order, even when reality is pure chaos. Synchronicity. A woman suddenly thinks of an old friend she hasn't spoken to in years, and moments later, her phone lights up with a message from that very person. It feels uncanny, almost as if the universe just responded to her thoughts. This kind of meaningful coincidence is what Carl Jung called synchronicity. The concept gained attention in the 20th century when Jung described it as two events connected not by cause and effect, but by meaning. To the person experiencing it, synchronicity can feel like a hidden pattern in reality, a personal message embedded in the world. Even long before Jung, many cultures believed in signs and omens, seeing meaning in the way unrelated events seem to align. Science, however, approaches it differently. Researchers studying probability and human attention explain that coincidences are mathematically inevitable. With billions of thoughts and actions happening every day, some are bound to line up in surprising ways. The human brain, wired to recognize patterns, naturally emphasizes those rare alignments while ignoring the countless moments when nothing connects. Mathematician David Hand's 2004 study, known as the improbability principle, showed that what appears impossible often happens regularly once we account for how many chances life gives for coincidence. Yet the emotional impact of synchronicity remains genuine. When timing feels perfect, a song lyric echoing your thoughts, a symbol appearing when you need guidance, it can feel deeply significant. These experiences can boost belief, hope, or a sense of connection. But that doesn't mean the universe is coded specifically for you. Instead, synchronicity reveals how the mind weaves randomness into meaningful stories. The coincidences are real, but the narrative we attach to them is the glitch that turns chance into destiny. Dream Incorporation. It's 7 a.m. Your alarm clock blares, but instead of waking up, you remain asleep. Somehow, that sound becomes part of your dream. Maybe it's a distant siren, a ringing school bell, or the chorus of a song. This fascinating phenomenon is known as dream incorporation, when elements from the real world blend seamlessly into your dream storyline. Sleep researchers have found this to be quite common. Everything from the sound of water running to the feel of a blanket slipping can be woven into dreams. In controlled experiments, participants exposed to soft noises during REM sleep often dreamt of scenes that naturally explained those sounds, proof of how adaptive the dreaming brain can be. The reason is simple. During REM sleep, the brain stays active, processing memories, sensations, and emotions. When an external stimulus, like a sound, a touch, or even a smell, slips in, the brain doesn't immediately wake you. Instead, it cleverly incorporates the signal into the dream's narrative, allowing sleep to continue uninterrupted. In ancient times, such dreams were often viewed as prophecies or divine messages, thought to connect the dreamer with another realm. But modern science sees them differently, as a subtle defense mechanism. The brain's way of preserving rest by creatively explaining away the disturbance. A honking car might turn into a chase scene. A ringing phone might appear in dialogue. For a few surreal moments, reality and imagination overlap perfectly. Ultimately, dream incorporation isn't mystical or supernatural. It's a beautiful glitch in the sleep cycle, showing how the brain bends reality to keep you dreaming just a little longer. Anemoia. A wave of longing washes over you, but for a time you never actually lived in. This curious feeling is known as anemoia, a form of misplaced nostalgia. Though not a scientific term, it captures a real psychological phenomenon, the emotional glitch of yearning for an era only known through stories, images, or art. People often feel drawn to decades like the 1920s, the 1960s, or a childhood that isn't their own, an imagined past built from movies, music, or faded family photos. Psychologists explain this by pointing to how memory and imagination overlap. Brain scans show that the same neural networks used to recall real memories are also used to simulate fictional or future scenarios. So, when you vividly picture yourself in another time, your brain can mistakenly attach the same emotional weight it would give to a genuine memory. Cultural influence deepens this illusion. Media often romanticizes the past, showcasing only its beauty, vintage aesthetics, timeless love stories, and simpler lifestyles, while quietly editing out hardship and struggle. Over time, these polished portrayals create a false familiarity, tricking the mind into feeling homesick for something it never experienced. A 2019 study on media nostalgia found that people reported strong emotional connections to historical periods they never lived through, a powerful example of how collective imagery can become personal longing. History itself reflects this cycle. The Victorians idealized the Middle Ages, dreaming of knights and honor. The 1970s revived the 1950s, celebrating its music and fashion. Each generation, it seems, looks backward, not to return, but to find comfort in a version of the past that never truly was. Placebo Effect. During World War II, a doctor named Henry Beecher faced a crisis. He had run out of morphine while treating wounded soldiers. Desperate, he began injecting them with a simple saltwater solution, telling them it was pain relief. To his astonishment, many soldiers reported their pain easing enough to undergo surgery. This moment became one of the most famous demonstrations of the placebo effect. The placebo effect occurs when a treatment with no active substance still produces genuine improvements. It's not just in the mind. Modern brain scans show that when people believe they're receiving real medication, the brain releases endorphins and activates the same pain relief pathways triggered by actual drugs. In studies on antidepressants, painkillers, and even Parkinson's treatments, placebos have produced measurable physiological changes in some patients. Historically, this effect was often dismissed as mere trickery. Ancient healers using rituals, colored powders, or elaborate performances that worked mainly through belief. But modern science views it differently. Expectation itself can spark real chemical responses in the body. Details as small as a pill's color, a doctor's tone of voice, or the setting of a clinic can influence how strongly a placebo works. This is why clinical trials always compare real drugs against placebo groups, to separate a medication's true effect from the brain's self-generated healing response. The key takeaway: the placebo effect isn't a cure, but rather a glitch in the brain's expectation system. Proof that belief alone can reshape perception and even change body chemistry. It's a powerful reminder that sometimes the stories our minds believe can alter what our bodies feel. Uncanny Valley. A robot smiles, its gestures nearly natural, its voice almost human, its eyes close to lifelike. And yet, instead of feeling comforted, you feel uneasy. That strange discomfort when something looks almost human but not quite right is known as the Uncanny Valley. The term was first introduced by Japanese roboticist Masahiro Mori, who observed that as robots become more human-like, people's emotional responses grow warmer, up to a point. Once the imitation becomes too close to real, but still imperfect, the reaction sharply drops into discomfort. Lifelike dolls, wax figures, and certain CGI characters often fall into this eerie middle ground, real enough to fool the eye, but wrong enough to disturb the mind. Psychologists have proposed several explanations. One theory suggests that almost human figures trigger ancient survival instincts, subtle reminders of disease, death, or decay. Slightly unnatural features like stiff movements or pale, lifeless skin resemble the signs of illness. Another explanation involves prediction error. Our brains are wired to recognize and predict human expressions and motion. When those cues are just slightly off, the brain detects a conflict, creating a feeling of unease. In a 2016 study at the University of California, researchers found increased brain activity in areas linked to conflict detection when participants viewed nearly human androids, confirming that our minds interpret them as perceptual glitches. This discomfort isn't limited to technology. Across cultures, folklore warned of dolls, mannequins, and effigies. Objects so human-like they seem to possess a spirit of their own. Modern horror films tap into the same effect, using that almost living stare to provoke fear even without movement or sound. Ultimately, the Uncanny Valley isn't really about robots or effects. It's about human perception. It reveals the razor-thin boundary between what feels truly alive and what feels unsettlingly close, but undeniably off. Quantum immortality. A man speeds through an intersection as a truck hurtles toward him. At the last instant, he swerves, missing the collision by inches. His pulse races. He knows he should be dead. To him, it feels like luck. But to some physicists, it could represent something far stranger: quantum immortality. This idea stems from interpretations of quantum mechanics, particularly the many-worlds theory proposed by physicist Hugh Everett in 1957. According to this view, every possible outcome of a quantum event actually happens, each one in its own branching universe. Extend that idea to life and death situations, and a radical implication appears. In the universes where you die, your consciousness simply ends, but in at least one branch, you always survive. From your perspective, you never truly experience death. You only ever wake up in the version where you continue living. Though no scientific consensus supports this as fact, the idea has captivated physicists, philosophers, and science fiction writers alike. It blurs the boundary between luck, probability, and perception. Tales of people who have repeatedly escaped death, like the Croatian man Frane Selak, who survived plane crashes, explosions, and train wrecks before winning the lottery, feed the public's fascination, even if chance provides a simpler explanation. Skeptics argue that quantum immortality can't be tested, making it more of a philosophical puzzle than a scientific theory. Yet, its allure endures because it reimagines mortality itself. If consciousness only continues in the branches where it survives, then from a subjective viewpoint, you might feel indestructible, while countless other versions of you are not. Ultimately, quantum immortality isn't proof of cheating death. It's a speculative paradox, a reminder of how physics, probability, and human perception can intertwine to make survival seem like something greater than mere chance. Hypnic Jerk. The Hypnic Jerk highlights how intricate and unpredictable the body's systems can be. It's that sudden, sharp jolt you feel just as you're about to fall asleep, the moment your body snaps awake as if you've stumbled, though you haven't moved at all. This brief but intense reflex is called a hypnic jerk, one of the most common experiences during the transition from wakefulness to sleep. Researchers estimate that nearly 70% of people experience it, particularly when exhausted or under stress. As the nervous system winds down, muscles relax, breathing slows, and the brain prepares for rest, sometimes the process glitches. A sudden burst of neural activity surges through the body, yanking it back to wakefulness. One leading theory suggests that this reflex has evolutionary roots. As the body relaxes, the brain may mistake the feeling for a loss of balance, triggering a quick muscle contraction to catch the body. In early human history, when our ancestors may have slept in trees or unstable places, this reaction could have prevented fatal falls. Over time, cultures created their own meanings for the phenomenon. In European folklore, it was thought to be caused by a spirit's touch. In other traditions, it symbolized the soul's temporary departure from the body during sleep. While these ideas added mystique, modern neuroscience attributes it to a simple misfire between the brain and body during the delicate onset of sleep. Though harmless, the hypnic jerk can startle you enough to break the moment of drifting off. It's not a sign of danger, just a leftover reflex, a small reminder that even the act of falling asleep is a finely tuned process that sometimes stumbles before it settles. Mass hysteria. In 1962, a group of students in Tanzania burst into uncontrollable laughter. What began as a few isolated cases quickly spread to classmates, nearby schools, and eventually entire villages, lasting for months and disrupting thousands of lives. Doctors found no virus, no toxin, and no clear medical cause. What they were witnessing was mass hysteria, also known as mass psychogenic illness. Mass hysteria occurs when large groups of people experience shared physical or emotional symptoms without any biological trigger. The effects can range from fainting, shaking, and nausea to convulsions or uncontrollable laughter. What starts with one or two individuals can ripple rapidly through a community via observation, suggestion, and social connection. When a tightly knit group is under stress, the brain's perception of threat or illness can spread like contagion. History offers many striking examples. In medieval Europe, the so-called dancing plague saw crowds moving uncontrollably for days. In the 1980s, a fainting outbreak in a U.S. textile factory prompted investigations for toxins. None were found. Each case followed a familiar pattern: a stressful environment, a single triggering incident, and fast escalation fueled by social reinforcement. Modern neuroscience points to the mirror neuron system and heightened attention as key mechanisms. When one person displays distress, others unconsciously mirror the same response. Stress hormones magnify the sensations, making them feel genuine. Brain scans even reveal that imagined symptoms can activate the same neural circuits as real illness. In essence, mass hysteria isn't evidence of collective insanity. It's a demonstration of how deeply human perception depends on context. When fear or tension runs high, the line between imagination and reality can blur, and entire communities can glitch together. Tip of the tongue phenomenon. You're in the middle of a story when the perfect word suddenly slips away. You pause, gesture, maybe replace it with another phrase, but the exact word stays just out of reach. It's a moment nearly everyone knows, the tip of the tongue phenomenon. This is one of the most common memory glitches, with studies suggesting that almost all adults experience it, often several times a week. Linguists describe it as a retrieval block. The brain has stored the word, but the access pathway temporarily fails. That's why people often remember the first letter, the rhythm, or words that sound similar, even though the target itself won't surface. Psychologists have studied this feeling for more than a century. The philosopher William James called it a fringe of consciousness, knowledge hovering just beyond reach. Modern neuroscience backs that up. Brain scans show that during these moments, the anterior cingulate cortex, a region linked to conflict detection, activates, as if the brain senses the answer but can't quite retrieve it. Throughout history, cultures have offered their own explanations. Some once believed that forgetting a word meant someone was speaking about you. Others thought memory lived not in the brain but in the soul or heart, with lapses reflecting inner disturbance. Today, research offers a clearer view. The memory itself remains intact. The problem lies in the connection, not the content. The state eventually fades, sometimes with the missing words surfacing hours later, sometimes not at all. Rather than signaling decline, the tip of the tongue experience reveals how our memory works as a network of fragments, and how a brief misfire can momentarily separate us from a word we know completely. Instant mood flip. In 2014, psychiatrists in Finland documented a puzzling case. A woman who said her emotions could switch from calm to irritable within seconds, without any clear reason. She wasn't an outlier. Surveys show that many people experience similar, sudden emotional shifts. These abrupt changes are known as instant mood flips. What makes them so striking is their intensity and speed. A person might feel fine one moment and suddenly anxious, heavy, restless, or unexpectedly cheerful the next. Unlike normal mood changes, which develop gradually, these flips seem to appear out of nowhere. Neuroscience points to the brain's delicate balance of neurotransmitters as the likely cause. Emotional stability depends on communication between regions such as the amygdala, prefrontal cortex, and limbic system. A tiny surge of chemicals like dopamine, serotonin, or cortisol, sometimes triggered internally rather than by outside events, can cause an abrupt emotional pivot. Most of these microfluctuations go unnoticed, but when they're strong enough, we feel the full shift. Sleep research has found that instant mood flips occur more often when people are tired, since fatigue makes emotional regulation less stable. Stress, hormonal changes, and even minor physical imbalances can also set the stage for these quick transitions. Historically, people explained such sudden changes in mystical terms. Ancient Greeks believed mood flips were signs of divine intervention, moments of inspiration or despair sent by the gods. In other cultures, they were interpreted as signs of possession or spiritual interference. Modern psychology, however, views them differently, as natural side effects of a complex, ever-shifting emotional system. The instant mood flip is a reminder that emotions aren't steady states. They're dynamic processes, constantly shaped by invisible chemical rhythms. A single fleeting change inside the brain can redraw the entire landscape of feeling in an instant, often without any reason at all. False awakening. You sit up, stretch, and begin your morning routine. But as you move toward the door, something feels wrong. The walls seem to shift, the light bends, and suddenly, you jolt awake in bed. You never got up at all. This looping illusion is known as a false awakening. Accounts of false awakenings date back centuries. Writers and philosophers have described dreams in which they believed they had woken up, only to discover they were still asleep. In some instances, the cycle repeats several times, creating the eerie sense of being trapped in an endless reset. Neuroscience explains it through the workings of REM sleep. During this phase, the brain's visual and motor regions are highly active, producing vivid simulations of reality. When a dream centers on the act of waking itself, the result can be so realistic that it becomes indistinguishable from actual consciousness. EEG studies reveal that false awakenings often occur during the transition between REM sleep and lighter stages, when awareness begins to return, but full wakefulness hasn't yet taken hold. In older traditions, these experiences were sometimes seen as spiritual warnings or signs that the soul had temporarily wandered. Folklore often portrayed repeated awakenings within dreams as omens or otherworldly experiences. Modern research, however, sees them as harmless glitches. The brain is essentially rehearsing waking up before allowing the body to fully emerge from sleep. Still, the experience can be unsettling, especially when paired with sleep paralysis or intense dream imagery. Even after full consciousness returns, the memory of waking again and again can linger. False awakenings aren't supernatural loops. They're simply timing errors, brief moments when the boundaries between dream and reality blur. Memory gap skip. Sometimes, as you recall a moment, you realize something strange. One sentence, one instant, feels missing. The memory flows smoothly up to a point, then resumes as if nothing was lost. But somewhere in between, a small piece has vanished. This fleeting blank is known as a memory gap skip. Unlike ordinary forgetting, which unfolds over time, a memory gap skip happens in the moment, erasing only a brief slice of recent experience. Neurologists explain that short-term memory depends on delicate networks in the hippocampus and prefrontal cortex. When attention wavers or neural encoding briefly fails, these circuits may skip recording part of an event. The brain then fills in the missing space, creating a seamless narrative with one invisible cut. Experiments on eyewitness memory reveal this effect clearly. Participants asked to describe a short video often omitted several seconds without noticing. Their recollections sounded complete, yet portions were gone. A memory gap skip is not an empty hole you sense. It's an edit your mind hides. Clinical observations add more insight. People with epilepsy or migraines sometimes report losing awareness mid-sentence or mid-step, only to continue as if nothing occurred. Even healthy minds experience similar skips under stress, fatigue, or sudden distractions. Historically, such moments were noted but misunderstood. Renaissance physicians called them memory eclipses, comparing them to the moon briefly covering the sun, total yet fleeting. What makes a memory gap skip so striking is its invisibility. Most lapses feel like forgetting, but here the gap is hidden within perfect continuity. It isn't a slow fade or a missing detail. It's a clean, silent cut in the film of experience, leaving the mind with a subtly edited version of reality. Invisible obstacle trip. A man walks along a flat, familiar path when suddenly, without warning, he stumbles. There's no crack, no pebble, no obstruction in sight. Yet his body reacts as if it's hit something solid. Embarrassed, he steadies himself and keeps walking, unsure of what just happened. This strange moment is known as the invisible obstacle trip. The phenomenon occurs when the coordination between the brain and body briefly slips out of sync. Walking may feel effortless, but it depends on an intricate system of predictions. With every step, the brain forecasts how the foot will land, adjusting for surface, balance, and momentum. If that prediction is even slightly off, the body moves as though it's encountered resistance, causing a sudden, inexplicable stumble. Neuroscientists describe this as a motor prediction error. The brain constantly compares expected sensations with actual feedback from muscles and joints. When there's a mismatch, say, the foot feels lighter or heavier than predicted, the system hesitates for a split second, triggering a reflexive stumble. In essence, the body is reacting to an error in its own forecast, not to the world around it. Such slips are more likely when we're tired, distracted, or recovering from injury, times when the brain's fine-tuned motor adjustments are less precise. Even trained athletes experience them when their nervous systems misjudge how the body should respond to movement. Culturally, unexplained trips have long been given mystical meanings. In some traditions, stumbling for no reason was considered bad luck or a warning from unseen forces. South American folklore even spoke of playful spirits tugging at people's ankles as they passed. Modern science, however, sees it differently. The invisible obstacle trip isn't a supernatural sign. It's a fascinating reminder of how much walking depends on prediction, not reaction. Sometimes, we don't trip over the world. We trip over our own expectations. Silent laugh loop. Sometimes, during moments of uncontrollable laughter, something unusual happens. People laugh so hard that no sound comes out. Their shoulders shake, mouths hang open, and their bodies convulse silently, trapped in a cycle of breathless amusement. After a few seconds, the sound returns. This strange but familiar experience is known as the silent laugh loop. Unlike normal laughter, which alternates between bursts of sound and quick breaths, this loop begins when that rhythm breaks down. The diaphragm contracts so forcefully and rapidly that airflow is cut off. The body continues to move as if laughing, but the voice disappears, leaving behind only silent spasms of joy. Physiologists describe laughter as a respiratory phenomenon, driven by the precise balance between exhaling and resetting the lungs for the next burst of sound. When laughter grows too intense, this balance fails. Oxygen levels drop, breathing muscles lock, and sound ceases. During prolonged silent laughter, people may experience dizziness or tears, effects of sudden shifts in breathing and blood flow. Interestingly, sleep researchers have observed similar patterns during hypnagogic states, the moments between wakefulness and sleep, when the body mimics laughter without producing sound. Culturally, silent laughter has carried different meanings. Some traditions viewed it as insincere, while others saw it as a sign of joy slipping into helplessness, the fine line where amusement becomes loss of control. Modern science, however, finds no hidden symbolism. It is simply the body reaching its physiological limit. The silent laugh loop serves as a quiet reminder that even in joy, our bodies have boundaries, and sometimes laughter itself must pause, leaving only the echo of its rhythm.